Welcome into the Sports Shuffle. It is August 15, 2023. I am flying Ryan Gokers along with.
Tampa Bay Ralph Joel Verona. I'm wearing the Bucks hat, as I sort of mentioned before. We punched the live button might be a little bit safer than the Rays hat, even though they won last night. Oof, big oof going on off the field.
Yeah, Wander Franco might be a monster. Not the way we were hoping as
Yeah,
a
because you
Rays
ended
fans.
up having, of course, the one. It was even though, yeah, I definitely like what you said. Everything happened because of a social media post, and you texted me that's dumb, and I was like, yeah, well, living in the era of maximum dumbness right now. But then it's just crazy how it blew up all of a sudden to all to you had sites on social media that normally you wouldn't qualify as mainstream. Then it crossed over to pretty much all of the local social media sites. You're just going, okay, this is blowing up, and then you're seeing national sites, and it's just gone from bad to worse. Of course, he didn't accompany the team for the road trip. He's been placed on the restricted list in a mutual agreement with the team, and now you have apparently I saw a story that a second apparently underage girl has come forward about a relationship. And keep in mind, he's married and has two sons. I just, I mean, I was very impressed with the Rays. I think last night that the fact that, of course, granted, it was a Tyler Glasnow start, so usually not always the case, but pretty confident win. But for the Rays dealing with everything just literally blowing up around them, then going on a West Coast trip, playing at a time that they don't usually play, that normally you're finishing up and they're starting. And then, of course, all of the Franco questions that I'm sure that Cash just gets asked everywhere he goes, and the other players probably having people shout stuff, and it's just not going to get any better, I think, before it gets worse.
No, this story's got a lot longer to go, I believe, before we find out the true facts and the punishment and everything else is going to go along with it. I don't know enough about the story in background and detail and when and how and all of this. I know Franco's a pretty young guy in his own right, so yeah, these details are going to keep coming out that are not a great look, but the process is going to have to play out. Obviously, he will have his time to tell his story and possibly go through a court procedure that will either indict or exonerate him, depending on how it goes.
Yeah, because when everything is hearsay and social media, it's just a very, very gray area.
And anybody can say anything about anyone. If it's someone famous, it can get picked up, and then it could get thrown all out of whack. I mean, we know Deshaun Watson had his incident with the 26
Oh
women. How many of
Lord, yes.
those were legit, and how many of those were those people trying to jump in? Was it really all 26 that were all abused, or was it maybe one or two, and then the rest thought about trying to get money? I know we go back to like the Duke lacrosse thing from like '07, where the woman made everything up and tried to ruin people's lives. So don't want to assume one way or the other right now, but very early in this process, looks like a budding young talent for the Rays is going to be on the shelf for at least a while they start to work through whatever the reality of the situation is. Of course, when things come out of social media, you got to take some of it with a grain of salt, but once it gets picked up and pushed out, it seems a little more real at that point.
Sort of like Pandora's box. Once you open it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, we are going to talk today about some news and some fantasy football draft strategy, as of course we are getting close to the fantasy football drafts and regular season as
Uh,
next month.
of the two teams, because I know we're shifting to something a little bit more positive, thank God. But of the two teams, because you had two running backs who were free agents who are now no longer free agents. Of course, we are talking about Ezekiel Elliott and, of course, Dalvin Cook. And when you take a look at both the teams, you look at the Jets and you look at the Patriots. I think of the two, you have the better quote unquote stack, for want of a term, would definitely be, I think, Hall and Cook, because when you look at the Patriots and you look at Ramondre Stevenson and you look where Zeke Elliott in standard, he's all, as you do scrolling, he's all the way down at 50, as opposed to Hall and Cook that are a lot closer together.
Yeah, I don't think Zeke Elliott's going to be a major impact for the Patriots. He did sign there, but he's going to be the number 2 option. Maybe get some goal line work, but nothing too adventurous, nothing too exciting for fantasy purposes. Ramondre is still going to be the number 1. For the Jets, interesting enough, they do sign Dalvin Cook, and the next day Brees Hall comes off of the pup
The
list.
Jets, don't you mean Green Bay East?
Yeah, Green Bay East, the Jets. So they get Cook and Brees Hall back within about a day of each other. And that is going to be an interesting dynamic because Brees Hall, very early draft pick last year, showed a lot of promise before getting injured. Maybe they're not confident he's going to be all the way back. Salah says he'll be ready for week 1, we think. Dalvin Cook, though, going to be there as at least an insurance policy, probably going to take some of the value off of Brees Hall. Running back position this year is going to be fairly difficult, I think, for fantasy circumstances. A couple other running back things.
And the other quick thing, if I can interject, if the signing of Dalvin Cook means that the Jets believe that this, whatever it is, legal trouble that's going for Dalvin Cook outside of football, either will be resolved, will be dismissed, or may even be something as small as a game suspension if it gets that much, because I don't think that they would do a risk assessment and sign him if he was headed for some major trouble, because that's a lot of money and a lot of game snaps that are going to be just poof gone.
Yeah, I don't think he's at any real risk, at least for this season. Back to the
Yeah, we
new.
remember Alvin Kamara, who had basically got to play for an entire remainder of the season, even though that happened at the Pro Bowl. And then the next season had his 3 games, which not much at all.
Yeah. J.K. Dobbins off the pup list, going to be back at practice, hopefully ready for week number 1. Still dealing with that knee injury from about a year and a half ago.
Jonathan Taylor was back at, but not really active. But at least he's back and he's going in the right direction.
Yeah, it's more than we can say for, Josh Jacobs. At least he's on site. I said this tone hasn't changed, still wants to trade, but he's at least in the building and, things can get talked out, hopefully. So will be playing for week 1. If he gets traded or not down the line, okay, but at least start the season playing. Brock Purdy fully cleared from the elbow injury. We mentioned Dalvin Cook, Brees Hall, and Ezekiel Elliott signing. Patriots tight end Mike Gesicki goes out with a dislocated shoulder. Nothing too serious there. Anthony Richardson is the starting quarterback for the Colts.
Or whatever that means.
Javonte Williams still expected to play in the second preseason game. He had a pretty bad knee injury early last season. We'll see. I think it's a little bit rushed, but we'll see how he fares.
And for whatever it's worth, Derek Carr really seems to be clicking with chemistry with Alvin Kamara. So, and as I heard on Eisen's show, that definitely Carr has the biggest, as he had a top 10 list, the biggest chips on the shoulder in the NFL. Definitely, that's Derek Carr. How everything sort of resolved, or really didn't resolve its way in on the other coast.
Yeah, and then Pete Carroll says that Kenneth Walker will be ready for week number 1. So good news on that front. So we've done a few mocks. We've done a few mayhem mocks now, and this is going to be an odd year for football and fantasy drafts and everything like that because
you have basically most years, I think you tend to have a running back who's the 101. This year it seems the 101 is Justin Jefferson.
I mean, it's not just the 101 going wide receiver. Most of the first round, more than half of the first round is going wide receiver early. Travis Kelce's in there as well for another pass catcher who's not a wide receiver.
Tyreek Hill in some leagues.
I mean, yeah, you've got Jefferson, Chase, Kupp, Kelce, Hill, all in the top 8 right now in sleeper ADPs. Then Diggs and AJ Brown rounding out the top 12. Top 11, I guess you should say,
So
because Chubb's 12.
so it depends upon, I think, where you pick, because if you're in a 10-team league or a 12-team league, unless you're like 10, 11, or 12, you're picking a wide receiver unless your specific strategy is RB first. But I think that if you tend to do the two RB strategy in this case, you're going to definitely hurt yourself.
Well, this is where knowing your league settings and scoring standards is going to be important. If you're in a standard league, no PPR, I think you still want those running backs early, especially if you can get the Christian McCaffreys, Bijan Robinson, Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, the bell cow, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb kind of guys that are going to be 3-down workers and get a lot of opportunity. And the big risk there is injury. And you can't predict that. Now, if you're in a points per reception league or even a half points per PPR league,
It's easy
then
for you to say.
yeah, then you might want to go after those wide receivers. But in the past, Joel is right. It used to be get that running back in the first round, have 10 of the 12 picks or more, be running backs in round number 1. Then you start seeing some wide receivers trickle in round 2. But it was not uncommon for the wide receivers to be pretty much untouched and the running backs to almost be completely depleted by the start of the third round in a 12-team league where the talent is just gone. Now you're seeing a lot more of those running backs slip into round 3, round 4, round 5, what used to be called the running back dead zone. And they're showing that they have value at that point. The question I have is, do you want to follow the trend of the wide receivers going early if you're in that middle of the first round and you're going to take a Tyreek Hill, a Stephon Diggs, an AJ Brown, someone who's not the elite of the elite of the elite like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp? Or do you want to zig when everybody else is zagging and say, okay, you guys want to go pay up for those wide receivers? Cool. I'm going to try and double dip and get a McCaffrey, a Robinson, an Eckler, and then pair them with a Henry, a Chubb, Taylor, or Jacobs. You want to take the chance and just have the best running back situation in your league. There's tons of wide receivers that are good. There's a good number of running backs. Now they're sliding down the board. So your personal preference is going to matter, but there is something to be said about saying, okay, I'm going to go with how things used to be, where you go running back heavy to start and then try and get those wide receivers later, but you will be missing out on a lot of the top end talent.
Because whatever it is you focus on those first 2 rounds, rounds 3 through 7, that's what you're going to have to make up with whatever it is that you're missing. Because if you do go the 2 RBs in round 1 and round 2, then you're going to miss out on a lot of wide receivers. You have to do some potential dart throws, and then you're going to have to do your depth. And then, of course, somewhere in there, you're going to want to grab a quarterback unless you want to, like, hold your nose and, good God, Baker Mayfield. But because all of a sudden you turn around, you're going to get to round 7, and that's going to be who's left.
And that's the other thing to mention. Quarterbacks have been traditionally taken later than their value, their points per game would suggest, because it used to be, yeah, you can go get a Pat Mahomes or a Josh Allen, and they're going to score you 23 points a game. And yeah, that's nice. Or you can wait till
But
round
what are
13.
you giving up
It,
that early in exchange for that pick?
yeah, or you can wait till round 12 or 13, pick up your Aaron Rodgers, pick up your Kirk Cousins, and they're going to get you 19 to 20 points.
Like
It's a difference of 4 points a week.
like you had to in that one mayhem.
Hey, it happens. And there's going to be some people still on that strategy because it works. You are losing out. You take Allen or Mahomes or Hurts in the second round, you're losing out on your Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Jalen Waddle, Amon-Ra St. Brown, area
Is
of talent that
do
you can't replace down the line.
do you in a 16-team league go quarterback with one of your first 3 picks? I mean, is that an absolute must?
No, in a 16-teamer, it's one of those things where you really just need to get those middle to late round picks right. So one of the years I won out, Kareem Hunt, his rookie year in the 9th round. He was unbelievable that year, and it put me over the top. I happened to have Todd Gurley that year when he went crazy in the playoffs and a few other good pieces. And if you have 4 or 5 guys that are just killing it in a 16-teamer because of how thin the rosters are and how little scoring depth there's going to be, you're going to dominate. But it was getting 5th and 6th and 9th round picks correct that got that done. You don't have to go running back heavy. You don't have to go wide receiver. You don't have to go quarterback heavy. You don't have to do anything. You can win any number of ways. But you have to get those picks right in a 16-teamer. I will say, if you can get an Allen or a Hurts in round number 3, that could give you enough of a positional advantage where it's worth it in a 16-teamer. I don't know if that value is there in a 12. Once you get to a 10, it almost works in the other way where, yeah, go get the value because there's enough talent to go around in a 10-team league. So
there's not as much pressure in a 10 or even a 12-team league as opposed to a 16-team league. You feel like, oh my God, every time it's your pick, like 20 players are gone.
Yeah, and that's how it is a lot of times. Some people are getting 30 picks between theirs, and some are only 16, 18. But no, I don't think you have to go quarterback in the first 3 rounds. But if you do it, you could give yourself a positional advantage. But again, you're giving up some good talent to do so.
That's the main question I think for going in the 2023 fantasy football season is usually you tend to think RB, unless you're one of the first couple of picks. In which case, do you go WRRB or WRWR, and then hope you're getting a super wide receiver, and then you just pray that you're getting good depth and running back. But I think you tend to hurt yourself if you go WRWR twice.
This is one of the weird years where you could draft, and let's go and see some of these completed ones that I've already done just to kind of go over what happens. 10-team league. You can go wide receiver, quarterback, wide receiver. Chase, St. Brown, Hurts, Cooper, McLaurin. Round 6, you can go Kamara. Round 7, Dalvin Cook. Round 8, Rachaad White.
Because Dalvin Cook is falling because, of course, of the 3-game suspension.
Yeah, anything inspiring in that? No, but Kamara, Cook, and White could be just fine. There's other options where you can go with all of the non-receiver position and then come back in round 6, DJ Moore, Mike Williams, Marquise Hollywood Brown. Personally, I think if you're going to err one way or the other and try and load up, you probably want to try a running back, maybe a little more overbalanced towards running backs, where you go 2 out of the first 3 rounds and get a wide receiver in there as well. Especially if you're picking number 1 overall and you go Justin Jefferson, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry might be there, Ramondre Stevenson.
If you find yourself that CeeDee Lamb is there, do you just pull the trigger and get him?
I don't. I personally don't think CeeDee Lamb's going to be great. I think Dak Prescott's falling apart, and that offense is going to slow down from what it was last year. So I'm not on the CeeDee Lamb bandwagon, but he is also going early 2nd round. I just think if you go double wide receiver early, especially if you're the back end of the 1st round, yeah, you might get a Stephon Diggs and an AJ Brown. That's good. But then you're looking Najee Harris as your number 1, Etienne Gibbs, Breece Hall as your 1. Maybe you turn around and get a second one of those to be your number 2, but Breece with the knee injury, Gibbs as an unproven rookie. There's some doubt. I would much rather, if I can get like a McCaffrey and a Henry and then try and go to an Olave Metcalf first 4 in a 10-team league. I think that's a lot more appealing. And then there's some good value in that 6th, 7th round. That at running back, you can try and get some depth and get the pick right. I think the more shallow the league, the more flexibility you have. But in the 16-teamer, I think the first 2 rounds you have to come out with 1-1, have enough balance where you're not hurting. And then round 3 is where you really need to get your strategy locked in. Is it go for the running backs and try and stack up there, knowing you can get some depth wide receivers like a Mike Evans this year, a Chris Godwin, a Michael Pittman, rookies like Addison, Smith and Jigba, Zay Flowers, and try and build your wide receiver cores that way? Or do you want to hope that those 5th, 6th round running backs that typically don't pan out as well as you hope pan out this year because they're being pushed down the draft board?
Well, what about the names like Moore, Watson, London.
Again, once you get to the DJ Moore, Drake London, Christian Watson, there's a few question marks around all of them, mostly at quarterback. I mean, Justin Fields looks like he's going to be good. DJ Moore, a big touchdown run on a negative 2-yard pass. Watson had some success with Rodgers, but now he's going to Jordan Love. Drake London is still attached to Desmond Ridder. So once you get in that 6th, 7th round, you just introduce enough question marks where it's not necessarily the team you're going to want. But all of that being said, there's still good options. I think Moore is probably a little undervalued at this point in the 6th round. Maybe if he has that connection with Justin Fields and Fields explodes the way some people are projecting him to, he could be an absolute steal in drafts in the 6th or 7th round. But again, go into your draft with a plan, what you want to do, and know your league settings. I know the 16-teamer is a PPR league, so you don't want to go wide receiver less in the first 2 rounds. You want to get at least one. But the pool for running backs just dries up so fast. It's a whole different mentality than a 10 or 12 team league.
Okay, the big question, the really big question, the important.
I guess we're going to have to wait for him to come back to find out what the important question is. So, anyways, waiting on Joel to come back. So just to look at the positional breakdown, first couple of rounds, as Joel's trying to rejoin, it is about 10 wide receivers in the first 2 rounds.
The importante question is not, is there no spoon? Because, of course, we already know the answer to that. The question is, after you look at the big ends, the 2 big ones, maybe you can even say 3, with Kelsey, Andrews, and Hockenson. They're all gone. So you don't have a tight end. When do you pull the trigger to get the tight end?
I will say this. If you don't go Kelsey and you don't go Andrews, bypass Hockenson, bypass Kittle, bypass Pitts. I think there's enough uncertainty around them. Hawkinson's just going a little too early, but there's enough uncertainty around those 3 that you just kind of wait. But you can get a Darren Waller or Dallas Goedert in the 8th round. Freiermuth, Engram in the 10th. Both have some good value. I think it's once that value is there. If Kittle drops to round 7, round 8, absolutely go after him as hard as you can. Same with Pitt, same with Hockenson. It's just not going to happen very often. But I could see a Goddard, a Waller, an Engram, or a Freiermuth being on a lot of my teams when I don't go tight end early. Then you also have to remember names like Dalton Kincaid, the rookie out of Buffalo, who's making some good noise. Chigakonkwo, who had some progress at the end of last year, getting in better connection with Ryan Tannehill and the rest of the quarterbacks. And Njoku hopefully can rebound from what he was before Deshaun Watson. He had a pretty good play and pretty good season last year. Before that, everything fell apart for the Browns once Watson came back because they hadn't played in 2.5 years. But there's enough names late. If you want to punt the position, grab somebody a little bit later, really build that wide receiver and running back depth, which, let's be real, running backs get hurt more than any other position. Wide receivers get hamstring pulls when you don't expect them. They don't usually have to get touched. You want to have solid depth. So I'm looking at a lineup I drafted as a mock from the 5 spot. Cooper Kupp, Derrick Henry, Chris Olave, DK Metcalf. Feel very comfortable with those 3 wide receivers week in, week out. But then Sanders, James Conner, Javonte Williams to get some running back depth, and Evans, Addison, and Brian Robinson. So I have 5 receivers, 5 running backs before I have a single quarterback pick. In this draft, it ended up being Anthony Richardson, and then followed up with Geno Smith just because I don't know what Richardson's going to be off the start. Then Cole Kmet in round 13 before a kicker in the defense because that was the type of league I was drafting. So I think there's merit to waiting on the quarterback still and building that depth, waiting on the tight end still and building that depth. But there are players like Allen, Hurts, possibly Justin Fields this year, Pat Mahomes, that you are not going to find a comparable player to late. Maybe Anthony Richardson is the next speed run game quarterback that can just light the league on fire. Probably not going to be right away. Maybe Tua, maybe Deshaun Watson or Aaron Rodgers has a great season close to what a Mahomes or a Burrow or a Herbert would have, but they're probably not going to get to that mark. So you have to understand what you're giving up. But in a vacuum, would you rather have Lamar Jackson or DK Metcalf? Lamar Jackson or Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon? that's the question you're going to have to ask yourself at certain points of the draft, is how you just want to build your team and what you think the value is.
Okay, so question as we have definitely reached the, as a sleeper they would say, the what the portion of the draft was. You're in the flex, you have your quarterback, you have enough running backs starting, you have enough starting wide receivers, you have your tight end, such as they are. You're now into flex. So the question is, when do you need, and do you ever need a backup quarterback? And question 1A, what is the priority for flex? Does it matter if you just get more RBs, even if you're not sure what the depth is? Or do you just alternate RB, WR, WB, WR,
Um,
RB?
you're fine getting your flex before quarterback. As far as drafting 2 quarterbacks, again, league will depend. If you're in a super flex, you must draft 2, probably 3, really. If you're in a 16 teamer, it's not a bad idea to have 2 viable quarterbacks on your roster because that waiver wire is going to be extremely thin.
Hmm.
But in a 10-team league,
Infinitesimally thin.
especially in most home leagues, I know one of my leagues, there's going to be 10 quarterbacks drafted in a 10-team league. I don't need to go get a number 2 because there's going to be a wide receiver or a quarterback 1 on the waiver wires. Once the season ends, you're going to look back and be like, oh, wow, last year Geno Smith finished quarterback 5. He was on the waivers for a long time.
When it's
So there's
a
going to be options.
when it's a 16-team deep league, Will Levis is going to be not on the waiver wire.
Yeah, he's going to be considered at the very least. So I don't think you do 2 quarterbacks unless you have a league that mandates you pretty much play 2 quarterbacks, or you're in a very deep league where it's not going to work out well if you need to fill them in for an injury or a bye week going off that waiver wire like our 16 teamer. As far as the flex, again, league settings do matter in this case. If it's full PPR, you probably will lean towards either a pass catching running back or a high volume target wide receiver, someone like Deontay Johnson, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett could be in that kind of depth pick that just gets a lot of targets, could get a lot of PPR value, or someone like James Conner, who's going to get a lot of passing game work out of that backfield, who, even though it's not a great team, they're going to be on the field a lot and get a lot of work. Alvin Kamara. So I think you need to know your league settings. And if it's standard, again, I'd rather have Aaron Jones. I'd rather have Ken Walker. I'd rather have Joe Mixon, who I know is going to get a lot of work and go running back heavy early. So that flex also works as a backup running back and then build in some depth behind it. So, Joel, I know you like to do, I don't know if it's league dependent or not, running back, wide receiver, and quarterback first 3 picks. Is that throughout all of your leagues, or is that just the 16-teamer?
It sort of has been my strategy recently, but I think I'm going to might have to change that. I think this year, just with all of the wide receivers that are out there, even though I know I don't think I pick early in either league, if I'm remembering when I pick.
I
But
don't think so either.
yeah, so I think I'm definitely later. So yeah, we'll just have to see. I think I may just end up keep with that usual line of thought, but we might have to refine that a little bit. We'll
Well,
see.
you're 10 in the 16-teamer, and
Oh
you're
yeah, so that
second in the 10-teamer. So that's an early
yes,
pick. But that middle of the pack, middle to late in the 16-teamer is
it's not right one of the first 4, 5, 6 juicy, really super picks.
yeah, being pick 4 and pick 5 in each of those, I kind of like where I'm at because my decision's pretty much going to be made for me. I mean, Jefferson, Chase, Eckler, McCaffrey, probably the first 4. Then it's between Hill and Cup. Now, if someone wants to jump up and take Bijan, someone wants to jump up and take Kelsey, maybe those options are a little bit better at 4 and 5, but I'm going to be happy with that pick. And then from there, I kind of know where I have to go, especially in the 16-teamer. Okay, well, I got Cooper Kupp or I got Tyreek Hill at pick number 5. I probably want to swing back and hopefully get Pollard, Stevenson, Etienne, Najee Harris in that second round. Probably pair up a third round pick for what's going to end up being a Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders. Now, you might be thinking, well, those are later round guys. In a 16-teamer, they're round 3. So I think, especially from that 4-5 spot, it's going to be wide receiver first, running back, and then build that wide receiver depth and hope for the best. It's just, I know a 16-teamer gets real thin real fast. I'm trying to think of what I'm going to do in a standard league if I end up at pick number 3, where Jefferson and McCaffrey go off the board. Am I going to go Chase or am I going to go Aguilar? Going to go Tyreek kind of thing. And that's where you want to plan ahead as best you can. If I'm in this position, that's where mocks come in handy. If I'm in this position, what am I going to do based on this scenario? It's going to be an interesting year to possibly be able to zig when the rest of the draft is zagging against what we saw happen last year, which was an all-time flop for the running backs overall and an explosion out of the wide receiver position. Remember, you want to draft off of next year's draft board, not necessarily last year's results, because last year's results are not guaranteed to repeat.
You sort of have to compartmentalize. Yeah, it's easy for me to say each year.
Well, I mean, let's use Christian Kirk as an example. He went in a 10-team league, picked 9.2, so pick 82 in this draft. He was the wide receiver 11 last year. He was a top type of guy. Wide receiver 11, and he's going in the 9th round. He's going behind DK Metcalf, who had an off year but was finished below him. Calvin Ridley, who hadn't played in 2 years. Ridley's going 5-4 in this draft. So if you're drafting off of last year's board, that makes absolutely no sense. But people are assuming, maybe accurately, maybe not, Ridley is what unlocks this team. He's going to be the wide receiver 1. He's going to get all this extra work. If he doesn't, that 5th round pick is going to be terrible. So you want to try and guess and predict what next year's draft board is going to be. That's why Bijan Robinson's going where he is. He hasn't proven a damn thing in the NFL. He's going pick 1.7 and sometimes earlier because people are assuming Atlanta likes to run the ball. He can get involved in the passing game. He could pay off that 1.7 draft capital. Now, rookie running backs tend to do very well. Saquon Barkley would have paid off that position, but it's a very expensive position. Best case scenario, he slightly exceeds his ADP, and you're happy. There's a lot of risk to taking a rookie. Does he hold up in the NFL year 1? Is he going to get all the work? There's no guarantee. Tyler Algier might get enough work to just hamstring the production. There's a lot of risk, but it could be the 101 next year is Bijan Robinson. And if you draft him 107, 108, it could be a league-winning type of pick.
So if you end up getting, let's say, Ramondre Stevenson, do you handcuff with Ezekiel Elliott or do you look elsewhere?
I don't think Zeke Elliott's going to do much. I think he's maybe going to be a goal line vulture. He's going to have a game or two if Ramondre Stevenson's out where he's decent. I don't know offhand if Zeke is someone you want to really draft. I mean, I'm looking for him in this draft where he went. Zeke Elliott, I still haven't found him. But
yeah, he's down there.
Yeah, he's down there for sure. Did he go undrafted in this? I'll find him.
He went undrafted?
I don't see his name on here. And maybe I'm missing it, but I'm scanning this all sorts of ways. It looks like Zeke Elliott in a 10-team league on Sleeper before he signed went undrafted.
So that must mean that, that before he was signed. So that must mean people tend not to think that he's going to have much of an impact on Ramondre's snaps.
I mean, if we ran this again right now with the news he signed, he might go way earlier than he should. I mean, Zeke Elliott's still a big name talent, but he's getting older. It looked to me like he lost a step in Dallas. So I'm not really worried about handcuffing anyways, because you can go and handcuff Ramondre Stevenson with Zeke Elliott, or you can do Jones with Dylan, or any Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. Or you can go and just have 5 solid running backs and have some flexibility if you wait and take the quarterback and tight end a little bit later. I prefer that over just handcuffing blindly and hoping that, if this guy gets hurt. You also have to remember most waivers, you do have priority or fab that you can go and say, okay, well, I got to go do this now if that running back or backup of any position is on the waivers.
Yeah, so while everyone's going for the Jamar Chases and the Justin Jeffersons of the world, and how sneaky is it to try to go after names that maybe not quite as sexy as Pickens and Burks, but there's a lot of upside there.
You're not going to do it the same area, obviously, as Chase and Jefferson. You can wait, but that's the other end of it. If you go running back heavy to start, you can go and say, okay, DK Metcalf is my number one wide receiver. I'm getting him in the 4th round. I can go after a McLaurin, a Ridley, a Jerry Jeudy, a DJ Moore that's got a lot of upside. Round 7, maybe decide Ayuk, a Deontay Johnson, George Pickens. You can take some of these shots later on Addison, on Zay Flowers. I think you want to have one guy like Metcalf or Olave or Samuel or Allen who has a fairly good history of performing well. And then if you are good at running back, then you can take those shots at upside players. You still want to get someone like an Evans that can just pace you week to week. That way, if Pickens doesn't pan out or Smith and Jigba doesn't pan out, you're not completely hosed. But there's something to be said about going for upside. You want to go for some upside. You don't want to do it in the 1st or 2nd round because that's risk. The difference between upside and risk is where you draft it. Bijan Robinson, I think there's a little bit of upside, but there's a lot more risk at 107. He goes at 212, 3-2 kind of range. There's just upside at that point because he's going at that point, he'd be running back 9, 10, 11, not running back 3. So I think taking guys like Kadarius Toney, huge upside, 9.9, just around the 90th pick of the draft. If he's healthy and Mahomes' number one target, he's got enough speed and dynamic playmaking ability to be another Tyreek Hill type of guy in that offense. And that's someone you obviously would want. And he's going in the late 9th round.
All right, draft strategy. So getting away from standard and PPR, let's say you're interested and you're going, this best ball idea sounds pretty interesting. And you tend to get into it because you like the whole idea of your draft. Then you don't have to set the lineups every week. And everything is taken care of for you. The algorithm sets up your best possible solutions. And I found myself doing that last year and just had an absolutely craptacular experience. So my question to you is, how do you draft differently for best ball than you do standard or PPR?
With best ball, you want to have true studs, which obviously means your 1st, 2nd, 3rd round, you want to go Tyreek Hill, Nick Chubb, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, and just get guys are going to be solid week in, week out. Maybe you go after an Andrews early. Then you want to get some players that you're confident are going to have plenty of work to be solid. And then you do want to take those shots on, okay, I'm going to go after James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. He might become the number 1. I'm going to go after Zay Flowers. I'm going to go after Brian Robinson and assume when he got shot in the buttocks last year, that slowed him down for a while, and he's going to be better. And you want those big upside plays. You also want to make sure you have 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends. Go late on the tight ends if you for at least the 2nd and 3rd. But you're looking for people that can have big spike weeks and another set of people who are going to have a nice, safe, reliable score. So if you go and say, hey, I'm going to have Kupp, I'm going to have Henry, I'm going to have Metcalf, I'm going to have Allen. All 4 of those guys should net you good points. But you can go after a Devon Achane. You can go after an Isaiah Pacheco, an AJ Dillon, who might not be week-to-week winners, but okay, Achane has 3 spike weeks. Dillon has 4 spike weeks. Oh, I also got Jerry Jeudy, who had 3 great games, and they could spike up and fill those spots that are not necessarily filled by the same top-end talent. It's a different mentality. I think you want to take more shots on players that have that upside than you do in a redraft, because in a redraft, you waste a 6th-round pick on someone with a lot of upside and they flop. You're not going to be able to just say, oh, well, I've got this guy on my bench who's going to recover. You're going to play that sixth round pick in your flex most likely, and they're going to hurt you until you either give up and bench them or they come out of it. And we've seen some, I mean, Austin Eckler last year, first 2 weeks were abysmal. Fortunately, he came out of it in week number 3. In best ball, you're not worried about slow starts or inconsistencies. You want people that can absolutely have spike weeks and just people that can put up monster numbers as often as possible. I think you go one quarterback, one tight end early to be your bell cow. Like if you go Mahomes, go get Anthony Richardson later in the draft. What if he explodes and he's great? And then go after Jordan Love, who might have great weeks. Yeah, Mahomes is probably going to be your quarterback most of the time, but you're not investing a lot to get the others. Same thing if you go with Andrews, go with Okonkwo, go with Komet, go with even stuff going out later, and then just load up on the best talent you can. You want some guys that are very, very consistent. You know Cooper Kupp's going to light up the world as long as he and Matt Stafford are playing. And then you also want guys like Zay Flowers who get a lot of buzz in camp, but you never really know. They could be complete flops, but they could also be the next coming of Justin Jefferson. You never know.
And the final question before we do final thoughts, because I know this is coming up on pretty much close to an hour-ish here. So as a joke, before we started the show, Ryan predicted we go 83 minutes. We're trying to go under that. The final question is: do you tend to just be absolutely bombarded with training camp and now preseason expectations? This one had chemistry with this one. This guy looks really good, and the hype train is out there, and they're really trying to up this running back or up this wide receiver or this quarterback. So, how do you tend as a fantasy drafter to stay even keel and not like, yeah, okay, I want this guy now because of this story that came out today? What's just the best way to sort of just take a deep breath, mentally step back? Okay, what was my plan before I heard X news and sort of just kind of stick to it without falling into all the hype?
You want to try and follow real noise. For example, Rashad Penny at one point got the first touch of all the running backs at training camp. Now he is barely touching the ball. That should indicate, and it may be that he's a great player and they love him and he's going to make the roster and they're trying to find out the rest of the roster, but more likely than not, that means his roster position is not as secure and he's going in the 10th round, and maybe that's too much. You want to have reports on actual opportunities in practices. You want to see how they're using games. Let's look at Khalil Herbert for the Bears. He got every running back touch. He was on the field for every play until the starters got pulled. That was a backfield I didn't want any part of because it was Herbert, it was Roschon Johnson, and it was Deonta Foreman. Who was going to be the one? Was it going to be a timeshare? Yes or no? Well, the coaching staff put on the field with the starters only Khalil Herbert. So in theory, Khalil Herbert should be the starter. He should get a good portion of the work, not necessarily a bell cow, but a good enough portion where you're comfortable drafting him. He's going in the 11th round. That's someone who probably should rise. When you hear coaches say, "Oh, they look great, best shape they've ever been in. He's got a great energy," ignore that. That's all trash. That doesn't mean a damn thing. They could be talking about some guy who was hurt last year and, oh, he's got a spring back in his step. Okay, well, yeah, he should. He's healthy. So try and focus on real news, not just the coach saying someone looks good or a media personnel saying, oh, yeah, he's got a confidence, he's got a swagger about him this year. Yeah, sometimes the story of Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford getting breakfast together does bear some fruit that Cooper Kupp's going to explode. But a lot more
Or
often, those little puff pieces just.
Derek Carr seems to be getting chemistry with Alvin Kamara, for example.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's nice, but you're not throwing to Alvin Kamara as your primary target. It's going to be Olave. It's going to be Thomas. It's going to be Rashid Shaheed. It's going to be Foster Moreau. I mean, yeah, Kamara will get his, but that's at least kind of in that realm. Like, yeah, it's good, but it's not anything special. But we see people get puffed up. Oh, this guy's going to have a big year. Oh, okay. And then they don't play. They don't have a big year. Like,
Oops.
coaches are not there to tell you exactly what they're going to do. Remember, Cam Akers at one point was about to get cut, came back, and at the end of the year was on a torrid pace to wrap up the season. And now he's going in the 6th round. And I didn't see them add anybody around him to make that running back room better. So they're saying, again, by their moves, they're saying Cam Akers is our guy. And also pay attention to the depth chart. You will look and you'll see, okay, well, let's go to Joe Mixon, because Joe Mixon has all these things going on legally and off the field. It's Joe Mixon, it's Chris Evans, it's Chase Brown. Anybody really think Joe Mixon's not going to be on the field a heck of a lot this year? They told you with their actions, Joe Mixon is going to be a big part of this offense. So look at the actual on the field. Hey, they're getting touches, they're getting more, they're getting the first team reps when this other person isn't. And look for what the team has done, especially at the running back room, because Kenneth Walker should have been a top 5 or 6 running back off the board. They drafted Zach Charbonnet 410 in this 10-team league mock draft that I'm looking at. So you want to make sure that you know what's going on behind the scenes and don't just listen to great shape, looks good, runs fast, great energy. Look for substance, not just noise.
Yeah, go beyond the flash and look for the substance.
Yep. All right, with that being said, quick draft strategy breakdown. I'm sure we'll do more draft talk as we get closer to the actual drafts next week. And with that, let's go to final thoughts for Joel.
My final thought is I definitely saw a story that I totally forgot about. Of course, when you tend to remember Greg Schiano's time with the Bucks, it's pretty understandable why most Buck fans would probably even forget that he was a coach of the team. Yeah, he actually, after he was fired, held his own press conference, if we remember that. Yeah, and you're listening to the press conference, you're like, okay, this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about, sounds very confident, sounds successful, until one looks at Schiano's actual numbers. In Rutgers from 2001 to 11, 68 and 67. 11 and 12 with the Bucks from 2012 to 2013. Gee, I wonder why he was fired. And now, once again, back with Rutgers, he is now 12 and 22 in 3 seasons with Rutgers since 2020. So if it's possible, Greg Schiano has actually gone from bad to worse, if that was humanly possible, since we tend to remember, that was one of the definitely worst seasons as a Bucks fan. And that's my final thought.
Yeah, Rutgers is not a good football program, so he's kind of hung up there. But he did have a couple of good years that led to him getting that Bucks job. But yeah, he's not a great coach. Yeah, my final thought, a little bit more on this Wander Franco situation. Just,
Really?
I understand that he's not an old person. Maybe he doesn't have the wisdom. Maybe he grew up in whatever circumstances he grew up in. But when you have the ability to sign a life-changing deal for over $180 million,
That's most people can't conceive how much money that is.
You know, in advance of that happening, you've been talked to, you've been hyped up, you know you're the next great thing coming down the pipeline. I mean, MLB ranks their prospects, and he was number one forever before he got there, it seemed like.
His face is all over the freaking Trop.
Yeah, him and Arozarena really brought life back to Tampa Bay baseball. Their stadium is still not sold out or as full as it should be, but I mean, I don't know if you've seen a Rays game on TV and you see how crazy Randyland is over there, and I think it's like 305 or 307 or whatever the section that is in the outfield. You know, standing right behind Randy, and they go crazy every time he's at bat. Every time he makes a play in the field, they go nuts. Even if it's just a routine fly ball, he makes a catch. It's brought life back to Tampa baseball. So for him to not have the foresight to say, "Hey, I can't do this," and I don't know. I think this happened in the Dominican Republic where he's from. And I don't know if there's a drastic difference in the law there than it is here. I know there's laws that say whatever the state wants the law to say.
And Ryan's talking about Franco, not Arozarena.
Yes, Franco. Still talking about Franco. You know, I know every especially when you're talking about minor in relationship. Every state has their guidelines. I don't know what Dominican Republic is. I don't know. But you have to know, okay, I'm set. All I have to do is not screw up royally.
Especially when there's a moral, I think they have moral and ethics clause that they.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have to wait and see where this all goes. We also have to understand Deshaun Watson got 250 million guaranteed after the fact. So this isn't an end all be all for Wander Franco, but this could be something that
Not a good look.
this could be something that voids his $180 million contract. It could be something that taints his reputation if he is allowed to come back down the line, if he is found to have done something wrong, especially that may have your big market teams, your Yankees and your Red Sox that usually shell out the $500 million contract to go, you know what? You're not the face of the franchise I want here. So we're not going to pay you, reduces your value, costs you money over time. Obviously, Joel said it's a great way to ruin a family. So it's it's just a real bad situation for him. Hopefully it all gets sorted out where the truth prevails. I don't want to say, I hope Wander Franco gets away with whatever he did, or this girl is hopefully lying. I want whatever happened to come to light and justice to be served as it's supposed to be. I think that's all we can really ever ask for in situations like this. But it's not a good situation, and hopefully, if he does not get found guilty and he does have a second chance to have a career and a good name, because they can come out and say, yeah, this woman's lying. Hopefully, whatever decisions he makes online keeps him out of that kind of situation. And if he is guilty,
Because I know
real
you
tough
have,
to root for him.
you have the other story with that an entire movie that was successful. Now it seems like it was a lie. So just you never seem to know who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth.
Yeah, so that's my final thought. Just hopefully, whatever the truth is what comes out.
Here,
And
here.
if it so happens that he is not guilty of what he's accused of, he is smarter to keep himself away from that situation going forward. All right, that is our time for the sports shuffle today. I am Flying Ryan Gilchrist along with
Tampa Motormouth Joel Verl.
And we'll be back, it looks like Friday, with a 3-person, 2 drafters and a Mayhem Master.
Friday. Gotta get down
for
Friday.
another Mayhem draft. And then the week after is going to be planned for draft week, where we're going to talk about quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, do some mocks, do some live drafts. Joel and I, being the big weather nerds we are, we understand that week may be a little bit hairy.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Hopefully not. It's still 11, 12 days away, so things can very easily change quite a bit. But it could throw a wrench in our plans.
Yeah, we don't want that.
No, we saw that movie last year. We don't want to see that movie again.
Yeah, Ian's was beyond suck, so we don't want any sequels.
Yeah, as bad as it was for you in Tampa and for us in Palmetto, Bradenton, I know Port Charlotte, I know Fort Myers got it way worse, and
especially the bridges totally
Sanibel,
from cities and basically looked like an atomic bomb was dropped on the area.
Yeah, so obviously we don't want any of that to happen, but we'll keep that in mind, and hopefully we'll be able to go unencumbered next week, do our drafts and everything as planned. But sometimes other things have plans of their own. So
Mother Nature sort of does whatever Mother Nature wants to do.
So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. Still a ways out, but
sports and weather together, especially this time of freaking year.
It's that time of year where football's coming, and so are the Hurricanes in more ways than one. Anyways, that's it. So we gone.